So on behalf of the Master's degree in Southeast European Studies, Politics, History and Economics at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, I would like to welcome my guest, Professor Nenad Markovijk of the St. Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for your invitation.
And we are currently in a period of great geopolitical peril. We have the Russian aggression against Ukraine, we have the recent events in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we have the Hamas attack on Israel and the Israeli response in Gaza. How does this affect a small country like North Macedonia?
Well, it affects the country in more ways than one, I think. And I have to make a differentiation here between all three cases because the consequence on public opinion, on politics, on general mood in society is different in all three cases. In case of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, I think that there is a big majority of society that stands against it and is pretty much not divided on that issue. But when you see a bit deeper, when you scratch deeper into under the surface, then it turns out that public opinion, especially among the ethnic Macedonians in the country, is very divided. Some of them are quite sizable, I would say, quite noticeable proportion of people even approving of what Russia is doing. But that's not per se, I would say, because of popularity of Russia, or it is a consequence of Russian propaganda, which is not as successful as people might think. It's more of kind of an anti-Western sentiment because of the long-lasting frustration with the European integrative process of the country, which is now ongoing for almost 25 years. And it's really just not finishing it at some point. When it comes to Nagorno-Karabakh, unfortunately, I would say that issue was completely ignored in our society. Maybe only the qualified public that really understands and follows international relations and international conflicts knows what's happening, but I have the impression that it went pretty much unnoticed. Although you would expect, at least on the level of Orthodox people, some kind of empathy, but not even that, I would say. While you'll probably be surprised, but the third conflict, the Hamas-induced episode, so to call it, and the response of the Israeli army in Gaza has more divisive potential, possibly, in our society than the first two. Why? Because aside from the fact that Ukrainians living in North Macedonia protesting in front of the Russian embassy, there were no local support groups for one or the other side. In North Macedonia, in Skopje, or in the capital, or in any other town, while immediately after the Hamas attacks on on Israel, support groups for support of Palestine started protesting in the country. I wouldn't say it was a massive protest. I don't see it having much of a conflict potential, but you see that people are divided even on social networks. You know, North Macedonia has a sizable portion of Muslim population, which is 30%, and you would expect that on that account you will find probably many supporters of the Palestine idea, regardless that we cannot really in any way approve of what Hamas was doing. On the other hand, there is one very sentimental issue in our society, and that's the Jewish question. You might know, you might not know, but North Macedonia lost in the Second World War 92 to 93% of its Jewish population. They were all deported to Treblinka, and almost none of them returned. So basically, it's a very sentimental issue, especially for the ethnic Macedonians. It has a divisive potential. I don't think it will go into a full-blown conflict, but it will, I think, underline, accentuate divisions in society, which are mostly along religious lines, among ethnic lines, and if it doesn't finish today, as I saw, the Israeli army has posted certain conditions for ending the conflict. That might happen, might not happen very fast. I think that this gap in perception, what is right and what is wrong in the situation in Gaza, will deepen in our society. I don't think it has a conflict potential, but it has the potential for a latent, I would say, conflict among the two biggest religious groups in the country.
Okay, so it sounds as if these external events can aggravate some internal divisions or highlight them within North Macedonian society. And in that connection, I would like to pick up on something that you mentioned a little earlier, when you talked about the frustration with the European Union integration process. Now, North Macedonia, in the case of your country, the European Commission had actually recommended opening negotiations back in 2009,
Yes.
and here we are so many years later, and you still haven't actually opened the negotiations. So how does that affect the way in which North Macedonian society faces these conflicts, and particularly does it aggravate anti-Westernism?
Yes, and I think that's connected to that allegedly pro-Russian sentiment, which is in fact not so much pro-Russian, that it's very anti-Western, exactly because the answer is partly in your question. So basically, we've been waiting too long in this entree of the European Union. Okay, there was the open issue with Greece, which was finally in 2018 settled with the Prespa agreement, and we thought that will be the end of it, and after that we'll have no bilateral issues to solve. Then, what was even more disappointing, the next veto came from a very big power, that was France. Okay, it was a short-lived veto. France wanted an irreversible methodology, which, by the way, I think it's a good idea. I think that some of the countries lose the stamina or the democratic capacity throughout the negotiations, have regular democratic backsliding, and I don't think we should be allowed, or we should have that in the process of negotiations. We should be quite steady, and I don't say the process is linear, it cannot be linear, but at least we need some kind of consistency when it comes to that. So the French veto was another disappointment, and that was the point when Russia's popularity peaked at some 3%, which was probably the top point of popularity of Russia. It was never above those 3%. But then the new methodology was accepted. France's conditions were met, and after that we thought that's the end of it. And then Bulgaria just said, objection, we want to raise another bilateral issue, which, unlike Greece, was never raised within the framework of NATO, which makes it quite inconsistent. Even Greece objected to the veto by Bulgaria, saying, why didn't you veto North Macedonia back in NATO? There were several politicians and intellectuals from Greece asking the question. This is this is a kick below the belt, basically. And after the third veto, I think that EU started to lose leverage, because in the case of Greece, there were multiple aspects. There was an identity aspect as well, but the bilateral dispute with Bulgaria is pure identity issue, nothing else. Mm-hmm. So, okay, there is now the so-called French proposal. It's now the EU's proposal, in fact, for managing the dispute. And the next step for us is changing the constitution, especially the preamble of constitution, mentioning also the Bulgarian peoples as one of the peoples that North Macedonia belongs to, or giving legitimation to the Bulgarian minority, which is not big, which is only 3,000 people in the last census, but still Bulgaria wants to see this. The more complicated aspect of this bilateral dispute is the historical committee. There is one with Greece, there is one with Bulgaria. One with Greece develops slowly, but it's I think that it's going well. The one with Bulgaria is unfortunately not going well, the situation within the so-called mixed Macedonian-Bulgarian committee. And the discussions are very hard. The standpoints of historians within the historical committees are completely opposite. And I'm not sure what will come out of it, but people in our country are pretty much afraid that additional identity interventions will be made, which is not in fact the job of the committee, of this mixed commission or committee, whatever you call it. Their job is just to give recommendations for the school books, how things should be correctly formulated, and it's going to be on a reciprocal basis for both Bulgaria and North Macedonia. We'll see what comes out of it. It's going very slowly at the moment. It's going with a lot of trouble and a lot of problems. I'm in the secretariat of the mixed committee, helping the Macedonian side in the negotiations, and for the time being, it's really not a process that is not quite, but at all successful. So that's the real fear. That would be in brief.
Okay, and you mentioned NATO. So that was another long accession process for North Macedonia, but you finally became a member in 2020, the newest member of the alliance. And of course, almost immediately after joining the alliance, we had the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Has that affected the way in which people in North Macedonia view NATO?
Yes, it's all wrapped up. You can condensate it in one comment: just our luck. The moment we enter NATO, a proxy war of NATO with Russia starts on the territory of Ukraine. We don't want to think that we brought bad luck. I think it would have happened even without us, definitely. But it was something that was quite disappointing for people. Nobody ever expected that Russia and NATO will engage in this kind of a proxy conflict. Nobody expected that the situation in Ukraine will blow out of proportions to this extent. In 2014, we figured out with Maidan events and the annexion of Crimea and all of the episodes that followed, we sensed that something is wrong, but nobody ever predicted that it will be a full-blown conflict, because everybody thought it was too risky. Come on, that will not happen on European soil. NATO is too close to Ukraine for something of that magnitude to happen, and it all turned out to be quite wrong presuppositions. At the end it happened, and I think that people were pretty much stunned. You have this shock effect when these kind of things happen, and I think that the essence of why people were a bit disappointed is because after the Prespa agreement, people thought it was a package. NATO, EU, and what people very rarely mention, the church. People forget that the Macedonian Orthodox Church, the Ohrid Archbishoprics, was recognized by all other Orthodox churches, including the Serbian, the Greek, the Bulgarian, the Russian Orthodox Church. And let's be honest, it was exactly because of Prespa agreement. Without the Prespa agreement, the church would have never been recognized. It was, I would say, the goodwill of Fanar, of Bartholomew, and I think that Serbian Orthodox Church just, how should I say, accepted. So another bilateral dispute with Serbia was solved, and now we have north-south control of the bilateral disputes, which are solved or put to bed at least for some period of time. But the eastern question, so to say, is quite open. The problem is that people felt that what the European Union promised was not fulfilled. And European Union, after allowing Bulgaria to raise the third veto in a row, lost almost all leverage in the country. And this really leaves us very open, very in lack of resilience towards Russian propaganda, harmful malinformation, misinformation, disinformation, you name it. And I think that not just Russia, but other regional powers and global superpowers are utilizing these small and vulnerable societies to wreak havoc basically in these societies, to accentuate the divisions that we were discussing and to further complicate the situation. If they cannot really win over the hearts of the people, they can at least cause problems. The problem is that they are starting to slowly winning the hearts of the people, the hearts and the minds, and this is really something that is quite disappointing. EU needs to stop this process and make some kind of a move, or indicate that they are interested in the region of Southeast Europe again, because there is a stalemate in every Southeast European country. North Macedonia is not putting the Bulgarians in the constitution, it's going nowhere. Albania just formally opened the talks, it's going nowhere. Serbia and Montenegro have zero progress in the last several years in negotiating with the European Union, it's going nowhere. Kosovo and Bosnia even further behind us, it's going nowhere. And in a situation when Ukraine and possibly other countries might be fast-tracked, that will infuriate people even more. We are waiting for 25 years as somebody is being fast-tracked, aside from the very sad and I would say depressing destiny that these countries have. Because people will say we really didn't deserve this. So it can further complicate the thing. Maybe we can ride on that wave of the Ukrainian crisis. You know, it's a little bit ungrateful to formulate it like that, but it's realpolitik, it's what really happens. Or maybe nothing will come out of it. The window of opportunity is closing, we are not progressing, and it's a very, we're having elections next year. The government will probably change to conservative back again. And then I'm afraid that things might complicate further in regards to the European integration, maybe inter-ethnic relations we see, because it always reflects on inter-ethnic relations between ethnic Macedonians and ethnic Albanians. But it remains to be seen, and I hope none of my predictions will come alive.
Well, thank you very much. You've given us a great deal of food for thought, and I think really focused our attention on the problems that the current situation in Southeastern Europe, this long waiting for the EU integration, how this affects the situation of the region in a situation of such peril as we talked about at the beginning. So thank you very much indeed
Thank you.
for being with us.
Thank you.